Hello and welcome to Gierok Farms. This video is going to be a bit of a farm update. We're going to go check over the crops and look and see how everything's doing. I believe it's August 26th, 25th, somewhere in there, to give you guys a bit of a reference. But we just had two calves here within the past couple days and they're looking sharp. That albino one was actually just born in the past couple hours here, if not the past hour. And we've been getting a bunch of rain for the past day or so here, so it's been a pretty prosperous time. But we're gonna head up on the hill and check out the crops up there. So we're up here on the hill. On the way up here we were talking about how much rain we got in the past day or so. When's the last time you emptied out the rain gauge?
Well, I emptied it before the last
before this storm.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so we got 1.5 inches within the since last night into middle of the day here now.
Yeah, it came hard and then it didn't and then it did.
Yeah, it was kind of on and off, but overall it was steady.
That's the most we got in one rain so far this summer.
Yeah, it didn't run a whole lot, which is a good thing.
This stuff actually looks pretty good. You know, I was here a few days ago, it wasn't nearly as thick, but it looks. So what our plan is with this is when we do corn silage, we're going to put this in that pile. There's definitely going to be plenty here by the time that stuff's ready. I'm sure some weeds will come like they do in this, and so there's 8 acres of this stuff to go in with the corn silage.
So the oats were harvested here a month ago, so about a month's time. This is how much it's
so
going
it looks
through.
good. So when you looked in the oats, and it's been a little drier there a few times in there, but there was a lot of grasses and weeds coming. I wasn't so sure how this stuff's going to turn out. Now you look across, it actually looks pretty good. It's hard to judge it. I remember back in '88, it was so dry. Neighbors were talking that they didn't think their new seeding was even going to amount to anything because there was nothing there. Everything just went dormant. He took the oats off and it was just, and he said it waited until the fall too. There was nothing there. They thought they were going to have to reseed. And then the next spring, he said it was one of the nicest crops they ever had.
Yeah, one of the biggest concerns for people using oats like us as a nurse crop is get them off in a timely manner and get your straw off so that it doesn't ruin your new seeding. Because if the straw sat out here for a week or a week and a half afterwards,
and it rains in it, and then it smothers your crop. Some of this green growth, that's regrowth of the oats. Maybe something that slipped through the combine in a few places. And I remember years, and I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but you can see right where it came out of the back of the combine. You can see kind of a little thicker there. So if there was any oats that slipped through, it's regrowing, but it doesn't appear to be competing. So that's why now, what could it be yet? It could be at least 2 weeks yet for corn silage. And this stuff's gonna be double what it is easy by then. And so what I get concerned about is by the time you get to later September, the oats is laying down on top of the alfalfa, you could actually start smothering out. Even though we take it off late, some people say, oh, you shouldn't cut after September 1st, but I think new seeding is more forgiving. If the fertility's good, usually enough green growth comes back, and this was fertilized too with some potash here right after I took the straw off too. But anyway, I think we've always had good luck getting a good crop the next year.
these late season rains, it's really made the pastures pop in the past couple days.
Yeah, you're right. I love it. And that's the one thing. So we're not getting our third crop hay done like we'd like to, but we got pasture, so we're not feeding our hay.
We're prolonging our pasture now.
Yeah, so it's kind of, you can't have the best of both worlds. The best hay making weather is in a drought time, but it doesn't always come when you want it.
We drove up here to look at some of our projects here out on the pasture and seeing how that new seeding's doing. We've gotten quite a bit of rain here in the past week, so
it don't look like it's washing anymore. The manure is still in the rut in the bedding that we put in.
yeah, it's just where it rained early on, it kind of killed out those seeds. But
I think what it did is it washed the seed out. one of the first rains. We didn't have very much rain, but there was nothing to hold nothing the first rain.
But I don't think this is anything to complain about. I think it's holding
good.
fairly well here.
It rained all morning. It's really wet. And the interesting thing, so I've been manuring this with the gutter manure and then some of the solids, but there's just some place to go with it between some of our cropping. And then what happens is the cattle have a tendency to leave it alone. They don't, you know, it doesn't smell right when you spread manure in it. So they're leaving it alone. They're not tearing it up. They're staying in other areas, because that's what I was concerned about. They'd cut down through here, make a path, and get a wash started. What I'm going to need to do, just looking at your dog there, that stuff's really getting up there. I'm guessing when this all dries out, maybe in 2 or 3 weeks, they'll go to bush hog and
Mow it all.
maybe mow it. Then it would, some of that stuff would come back before it freezes to this year.
Oh, I think it's doing pretty well. I think the only reason you'd have to be concerned if you see new vegetation getting ripped up.
Yeah, you don't want to see it tore out again, because there was kind of a ditch down under the trees. The interesting thing is they always say the woods is so good. The woods up in the hills above the fields is fine, but typically what I've noticed on our farm is any woods that are below the fields, that's where the ditch starts, in the woods, because the grass can't grow under them trees.
Yeah, or even like some people gripe about when they see farmers cleaning out along creeks and trees like that. A creek filled with trees will wash way more than a creek filled with grass.
Definitely, and we've got a prime example on ours. Where I bought that one of those partials I bought there. Part of it was creek and trees, box elder. It was huge stuff, and the hole that was in there, oh gosh, that had to be over 100 feet wide. And I think I could have put every piece of machinery I had down in that hole, and you would not have seen it from the road. That's how big it was. And then downstream from that was all cleaned out. The grass on the banks, you could have jumped across the water without hitting the water. It was you know, very almost so grown in that it was actually filling in.
Yeah. From
what was eroding upstream coming down into ours. I mean, a few trees here and there, but the grass and even not just vegetation, grass, because you get the bigger, taller weeds again. They're
almost kind of like a tree where they're one big stem and then there's nothing underneath them because their leaves shade out everything. Yeah. The grass does a great job at
older grasses they'll lay down, and then my father-in-law used to say if you didn't cut your first crop until July or later, you almost get first and second combined, because the first crop almost lays down and then the new growth is starting to come through again. So it kind of keeps replenishing itself. So eventually you got a carpet that is so thick.
Yeah, it almost acts as a funnel too once it lays down. It kind of helps divert the water. That's why your waterways are grass. But yeah, we're happy with what we're seeing up here on the new seeding in the pasture. I think it all looks good.
We're gonna go check that upper rim there. I want to see what it's doing over there where we diverted that water. And but so far I think we're out of the woods so far with this big rain. This is a 40 I bought off a different farm, and it just happened to be the notch into our farm. This creek was from where you're standing here until that corn, and the hole was so deep. I would say it filled in at least 8 feet. And now we are what? You know, we're over 20 years later. We're 25 years later. And this is full of trees, and they were hanging over this like this, these big box elder and stuff. And ever since I cut that out, it started healing up. And now what's happening is from upstream, it's just filling in more. And so you can't even see the water. You can hear it down there. And the grass is so thick, and then the grass lays down. I mean, you're not going to get any erosion in here. So we would get like a 3-inch rainfall or something where it comes really hard. What it does is it just comes up enough, it runs the grass and stuff down, but it lays it down. So it's almost like the water's running on a tin roof. You know, it does not take the soil. It would even look nicer if I could actually drive down here into the tractor and mow it, but it's so uneven, it's not safe. Prime example of how it can be and then how it heals up later if you change it. And then in here, there was ditches in this coming into the creek too. There's peat muck for soil. We did have to do a little bit fixing. We did put some tile in here last fall to help straighten things up, but there was a big ditch that came up in here too. And the same thing, you could have drove a chopper box down in there and you would not have seen it from the road. It was just crazy. So we got all that fixed back up and got things seeded back down. And now we'll make hay here once every year in later June, make a first cutting of hay for our heifer stuff. And then we have electric to fence it away from the cows, and then this connects up with our permanent pasture. So then from late June all the way until winter, they're grazing this.
It's a good example how grass really helps hold on to things and keeps things nice. We're gonna head over to the cornfield and show you how that's doing. So these fields are our bottoms, and part of these fields we'll chop. One of them will almost chop the whole thing, and then what's left we'll pick.
And I noticed they're all kind of, they're not filled out all the way. So I don't know if that dry weather.
Yeah, I think that's a sign of a dry July.
I mean, this is
late July, early August.
We just didn't get that. I don't know if that would all I could figure. Otherwise, it looks pretty good. I mean, they're not quite as big as, I mean, you're looking at the stock. There's more than enough here, you know. Everything looks good and healthy all the way from top to bottom.
There's a little bit of tip back.
And we're not quite as even and square. It don't seem like the cobs are quite as big as they were last year. But this is corn on corn on corn. So it's like 20 years of corn on the same field. Cool. But yeah, as far as drainage, this is heavy.
3, 4. Yeah, I'd say 16. So
I think they're all pretty uniform.
So 28 to 30 by 16. Ain't terrible.
No, I mean, I'm just looking at the plants themselves. And
what are you looking for when you're deciding to chop?
For one thing, just looking at the cob, there's not one dent at all.
We're talking dent too, for those of you that don't know. The top of the kernel will kind of poke in as it starts to dry out.
Really, that's what it is. It's the moisture starting to come out, and this stuff isn't even close to denting it. What I do, and sometimes you got to visually look at your stock. Used to be that stay green corn, I think back in the 90s. Some of that was where the cob was ripe and the stock was grass green from top to bottom yet. So then the overall plant moisture was pretty high. But then you needed a kernel processor, which in your chopper would actually crack every kernel. So it actually goes through some rolls. It don't just chop it in little pieces. It goes through rolls and actually cracks every kernel besides so that the cow can digest it. So if I start poking the end of a kernel that I figure might be ready for chop, I shouldn't get this milk or very, very little of it. And this here would be obviously all milk. So you poke them and you can just... So right now, if I was to go through there with a chopper with this right now today, underneath my chopper, if there's any place the water can get out, you would see it running pencil thicker. You know, the juice, because of the... it'd almost be like mashing it instead of chopping it.
Last year we chopped when it would have been Labor Day weekend.
Last year was a little further ahead. We planted earlier. I think this year our heat and everything was here. Well, what are we? We're still August yet.
Yeah, it's the end of August 26th.
Today, and this isn't terrible. And this field is the furthest back in the valley that I got corn in. So this gets a little less sun as we get closer out there. So now what is this, a 97 day, I think this was? And we were planted, was it 16th or 17th or 18th or something of May?
Right around there.
Because there was no warm weather until then. Because we didn't even put cows on grass until quite late this year. Once it got warm, it stayed warm. And I think that was something that really helped a lot as far as getting the corn to do what it's doing. But I don't know, we've had years we're chopping the 20th of September. You know, so now if it still stays warm, I'm gonna guess 2 weeks yet.
I'm gonna grab a cob from this field and see if there's any difference. Went in a couple of rows. See what we got here.
These fields are all planted the same day. Well, let me take that back. This one might have been a day later. I shouldn't say they were the same. I have to look at my records again. Because this field here, there's a couple little wet spots in. I might have waited a day or two, which I don't know. It sometimes makes a difference. But this looks a little bit, but they're still not filled out. They're all kind of like that.
So 16 by 30, 32.
Not terrible.
Yeah,
We've seen some 18s. I think last year we had a lot. The cubs were thicker.
Yeah. So all these bottoms are roughly in the same ballpark. I think the fields closer to home might get a little bit more manure.
Well, it's manure, but it gets more sun, and it is.
And these fields do get a cover crop too, compared to this.
Yeah, this one didn't get the cover crop. This one was just chiseled in the fall. That one. Yeah, this one was green.
Yep.
Both of these. And then the cover crop did better as we went out further too. See, that's the difference. With the hills and living in a valley like this, the further back in the valley we go, it could all be planted the same day, and you could see it over. It could be a week to 2 weeks difference in how the corn matures. So as we're harvesting dry grain in the fall, we're leaving those to last.
Yeah.
And then even on top of hill, where it gets the sun longer, is usually more ahead. But then you sometimes get down along the trees, so you
Kind of evens out that way.
you might end up taking that in consideration. So, but I look at these crops. I'll take this crop as better than average. So
Yeah, it was a decent year for corn, other than it getting a little dry there late July, early August. But
So the one thing we got to keep in our head, it's not in the bin or the bag or the silo yet.
yeah, we could have a crazy.
I mean, things
weather
can happen,
event.
all sorts of things weather-wise can happen. But again, that's nothing. I guess we have to feel we did what we could do when we had a chance to do it, and Mother Nature does the rest. So we just take what we get at the end. We don't woulda, coulda, shoulda. Those days are done. That was done this spring.
But I'd say overall today, I think we're happy with what we're seeing.
Yeah, I think so too.
And thanks for coming along with us. We appreciate it. Leave a comment down below what the crops are doing in your area. Like I said, this was filmed at the end of August. And hopefully we have a good harvest, and you guys as well.